Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on Saturday to talk some Steelers football with me. We got some pretty interesting trade rumors to be put out today by the Athletic's Dianna Russini surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers that we're going to be discussing on today's show. Plus, the Baltimore Ravens got some really bad news today. I'll let you guys know what that is at the end of today's show. But before we get into today's content, make sure you guys click that subscribe button because technically today is my day off, but I decided to get in front of a camera today and give you guys some Steelers content because that's what we do here on Steelers Talk. Whenever there's new juicy rumors, whenever there's breaking news, whatever the case may be, if there's something to talk about when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, doesn't matter if I'm on the clock or not, I'm going to get in front of a camera and I'm going to talk about it and get you guys a video. So if you guys appreciate the dedicated coverage that you get here on Steelers Talk, make sure you guys click that subscribe button to never miss any of our videos. All right, so let's get into really the big kind of story of the day dropped by the Athletic's Dianna Russini, who claims that the Jacksonville Jaguars are now listening to trade calls for second-year wide receiver, former first-round pick out of LSU, Brian Thomas Jr. And this is the exact wording from Russini this morning. Quote, the Jaguars are listening on calls for wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., even if a move feels highly unlikely. They're also shopping for defense, unquote. So the fact that Russini specifically points out that it's highly unlikely or that feels highly unlikely that Thomas will be dealt tells me that the asking price for him is extremely high. So if you think the Steelers could potentially get him for like a second or a third round pick, think again, it's probably at least a first round pick. It's probably first round pick and change, maybe even two first round picks could be as high as that. Because, Brian Thomas Jr., he's got really the complete package. He's got great size. He's got incredible speed and athleticism. He can track the deep ball extremely well. He's really good after the catch. And he might not be the most refined, best route runner in the world yet, but he is certainly getting there. He's already had growth in that department throughout his NFL career. This year, just having a really tough time connecting with Trevor Lawrence, and he's had some drop issues. But the potential is there with a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. to be a top 10 receiver in the National Football League, and he still has multiple years left on his rookie contract. So the fact that Russini is saying it feels highly unlikely that he's going to be dealt probably tells me that this is going to cost whoever trades for him, if a trade's going to happen, at least a first-round pick, probably even more than that. Might be a first-round pick and a starting caliber player. It might be a first-round pick, like a third-round pick, maybe even up to two first-round picks to even get in the conversation there. But it's certainly a big name and something that a lot of people on Steelers Twitter right now are talking about. But unfortunately, guys, if you're getting your hopes up for BTJ in a Steelers uniform, I would say I would highly doubt the Pittsburgh Steelers are in the market to trade as high of a price tag as they would need to get a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. I think that the Steelers feel very good about their offense right now, and they're being very precious with their draft picks. So, right now you can make an argument since week 4, they've been a top 10 offense in the game. Aaron Rodgers is playing very well. They've loved their heavy tight end personnel packages. DK Metcalf has been playing well. You're getting Calvin Austin III back here, who the team really likes. I think the Steelers are certainly in the market to add wide receiver depth and to add another good wide receiver weapon to this offense, but I don't think they want to break the bank for one. And as intriguing and as fun as the idea of Brian Thomas Jr. in a Steelers uniform is, especially because if you get him, you have him under a rookie cost-controlled contract for the next several seasons. And you compare that with DK Metcalf, who's the guy you're paying right now, and those two could arguably pair up and make one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver duo in the National Football League. I think that the Steelers feel pretty good about where the offense is at, and I think that they're more in the market for a wide receiver that would cost them at most like an early day 3 draft pick. But honestly, I think they're probably hoping for like a mid day 3 draft pick. Like I'm sure they'd probably like to give away like a 5th round pick, like they did last year at the trade deadline, for example. Now, who knows which receivers are gettable for that price tag before the trade deadline, but I can tell you this right now, Brian Thomas Jr. is definitely not. I would say, the guys that are available for a 4th or 5th round pick, the Steelers will be interested in. And honestly, they might be interested in someone, say, like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who doesn't cost any draft picks, but has that experience with Aaron Rodgers. He's a deep threat. All these different things, still has his speed with him. So that might be something that the Steelers would prefer over giving up a draft pick in a very important draft for them next year. For, especially like a first round draft pick, which I think what this would cost if you're going to go out and get a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. And like I said, I think Jacksonville might even be asking for more than just a first round pick, which is just an insane price tag that I don't think the Steelers necessarily feel the need to have to go out and make at this point in time. Especially if it's a first round pick, because they want to leave their options open to draft a quarterback next year if they feel like they need to. So definitely don't see BTJ being a Pittsburgh Steeler. I would not get my hopes up on that. Now, some people have suggested, hey, let's trade Alex Highsmith and kind of reduce the price tag in terms of the draft pick that you have to give up. Some people are suggesting Alex Highsmith and a fourth-round pick for Brian Thomas Jr. I would say that that's probably something that Jacksonville probably wouldn't accept. They do have Josh Hines-Allen. They do have Trayvon Walker. I think the help that Russini talks about that they're looking for on defense is more in the secondary than up front. And also, I think that they would want more than a fourth-round pick if Alex Highsmith is in the deal. I think they would almost want like a first and Highsmith, or at least a second and Highsmith, to be able to let go of Brian Thomas Jr. Because I think they realize how valuable an asset Brian Thomas Jr. is on the open market. So, I really don't see, Highsmith being involved in a deal here. Then also, you think about Highsmith and, the fact that he's a defensive player and one of the better defensive players on the Steelers. Does it really make sense to trade away one of your starting defensive players in a very key spot when your defense is struggling and, frankly, your offense is playing pretty darn well? For an offensive player, I don't know how much sense that really makes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if anything, you want to be keeping your defensive players on the roster. And, some people would argue you should be trying to get a defensive player to add to this team before the trade deadline to try and jumpstart this defense instead of, going out and getting a player on the side of the ball that's actually working at this point in time. Now, with that said, even though I would be shocked to see the Steelers trade away Alex Highsmith, even for a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., I was surprised when they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick. I did not think in a million years Mike Tomlin was going to sign off on a Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, even for a guy like Jalen Ramsey. But they ended up doing that. So, who knows if an offer and an opportunity presents itself where it makes sense to trade Alex Highsmith, who knows? Maybe they would do it. I would be really, really shocked to see them do it. So I don't want you guys to get your hopes up too high, but, it would certainly be an interesting trade if they ended up doing that. Let's just put it that way. But at the end of the day, don't expect Brian Thomas Jr. to be somebody that's really in consideration for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sure that will disappoint some people, and I'm sure some people in the comments will disagree with me on that, but I just don't see the Steelers being willing to pay the kind of price tag that I think Jacksonville's going to want for him. In other news from Dianna Russini today, if you're hoping the Steelers were going to get Chris Olave, according to Russini, the Saints are not expected to trade Chris Olave, and that he is expected to stay in New Orleans. Olave himself has said that he wants to be a Saint for life, and he wants to be there. He doesn't want to be traded, and he is still young, and he can still be a part of their rebuild there in New Orleans. I thought that he could be a potential trade target because the concussion history that he has makes him a little bit of a risk for New Orleans to give a long-term extension to. But he's been playing really well with Spencer Rattler over the last few weeks, and it sounds like that team views Olave as a core building block for them in the future. So it doesn't sound like Chris Olave will be leaving the New Orleans Saints. Now, with that said, I still think that Rashid Shaheed and Brandon Cooks could absolutely still be gettable for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially for the price tag that we talked about earlier. Like, if you can get Rashid Shaheed for like a fourth-round pick, I think that is something the Steelers would definitely be interested in. They do love their speedy, deep threat receivers because the way that this offense is structured, they want to be able to dominate at the line of scrimmage, force teams to play slower, and with single high safeties, which opens up the deep shots to DK Metcalf and whoever's on the other side. And Calvin Austin III is more than capable of being that, flanker, Z, deep threat type of guy. He's got incredible speed, and he's actually got better hands than people give him credit for. But Shaheed could, add even another deep threat to this Steelers offense, especially if they want to play more 13 personnel. And then if they want to trade, let's say they don't even want to give up a fourth or a fifth round pick, they'd rather trade like a sixth or a seventh round draft pick. Brandon Cooks makes a little bit more sense potentially there because he can still run routes. He's still got really quick feet. He still has tough hands. He doesn't have the deep threat ability anymore, doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the yak ability that he once had all those years back when he was like a legit number 2 wide receiver. But now he's more of a number 3 that can run some good routes, create some separation versus man, and make some tough catches, more of a possession type of guy in the National Football League today. So, keep your eye on Brandon Cooks. It could be a 7th-round pick, a kind of acquisition for the Steelers if they want somebody that can play on third downs, be a little bit more of a route runner, play with good hands. That's certainly a possibility. It's not my favorite possibility, but certainly is a possibility. And the guys right now that I would say you should be keeping your eye out for as a Steelers fan in terms of receiver targets, I would say Jakobi Meyers is probably the most likely trade target for the Steelers because Meyers is getting older. He wants to be traded out of Las Vegas. And I think that because he's on an expiring contract, he's a little bit older. He's never been a true number 1. I think that he would be very gettable for an early day 3 pick. So either a round 4 or round 5 pick. I think for a 5th-round pick, if you're getting Jakobi Meyers for the same thing that you gave up for Mike Williams last year, you're feeling really good about Jakobi Meyers coming in. And I think that he's kind of that perfect mix that the Steelers are looking for. Now, he doesn't really separate down the field, and he's not a vertical threat. But the Steelers, I think, have plenty of those. They got DK Metcalf. They've got, Calvin Austin. They've got Roman Wilson, who's a 4-3 guy as well. Like they've got enough guys that can, that can stretch the field vertically. What they don't have enough of is guys that can separate versus man coverage consistently, especially versus press. And Jakobi Meyers is somebody that can absolutely do that. He's got great size, physicality, so he can take on some physical corners on the outside, but he's also got machine gun feet, super good route runner, both versus man and zone. He's smart enough to find those soft spots. He's got really good hands, an over 60% career contested catch rate, which is really, really good. So still keep your eye on Jakobi Meyers because I really think he will be traded before the deadline, and I think the Steelers are really honing in on him. So I'm really, really hoping the Steelers can get Jakobi Meyers because I think he's the perfect mix of fit with the Steelers offense, the right price tag, and the Steelers have been reportedly interested in him for multiple weeks now. But other than him, Rashid Shaheed is somebody that I could see. If you're somebody that likes the Brian Thomas Jr. idea, somebody with a very similar skill set is Calvin Ridley. Now, Ridley is much older, and Ridley is much more expensive especially over the next couple of seasons, but he doesn't have any guaranteed money on his deal if the Steelers trade for him this year, so you can let him go if he's not playing up to your standards. And, if you're looking for that skill set of bigger body, great speed, great vertical threat, great route runner, honestly, Ridley's probably an even better route runner than Brian Thomas Jr. is. Now, like BTJ, Ridley's had some, hands issues, some consistency issues in terms of catching the football. But if you're looking for somebody that separates to all 3 levels of the field and is an excellent route runner at a good size, and for a pretty gettable price tag, I think Ridley could be got for like a 4th-round pick. So Ridley's one to keep your eye on, in my opinion. Also, Juwan Jennings is one to keep your eye out for. There's some receivers getting back into the lineup for San Francisco. Jennings has been getting the ball less and less, and he's already, had some contract quarrels with San Francisco. Would not be surprised if he's moved before the trade deadline. Christian Kirk is another name to keep your eye out for. More of a slot guy, but good route runner. Steelers were interested in him last year before he got injured in Jacksonville. He's currently dealing with a hamstring injury in Houston, but he's probably going to get healthy in time for the trade deadline. So keep your eye on Christian Kirk. Also, Alan Lazard and Brandon Cooks are kind of like the lower level, give up a 7th-rounder kind of guys. Of course, Lazard has that experience with Rodgers. And then Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I would say, is the most likely free agent target if they're going to go that route. If the Steelers don't want to give up a draft pick, but they still want somebody that's a deep threat, they still want somebody with experience with Rodgers and can, that already has established chemistry with him, somebody that can, be more of a depth piece for them. He would be super cheap. I could see Marquez Valdes-Scantling being the target for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I'm hoping it's Jakobi Meyers. I'm hoping it's Calvin Ridley. I'm hoping it's Jauan Jennings. I'm hoping the Steelers make, a bigger move here and take a bigger swing, because if DK Metcalf, God forbid, goes down second half of the year, if Calvin Austin III, God forbid, goes down in the second half of the year, you want to have another guy that you trust as a bona fide starter, every down starter that you can put out there on every single play and trust. And really command attention from an opposing defense. So I'm hoping it's Jakobi Meyers. I'm hoping it's Jauan Jennings. I'm hoping it's Calvin Ridley. I'm hoping it's one of these guys that are, true bona fide starters in this league. And, the Steelers have 12 draft picks, man. You can give away a 4th or a 5th round pick to make sure that you have really good depth at the wide receiver position. Give yourself a little bit more flexibility in terms of the formations and the personnel that you can run. Right now, I would say the Steelers don't feel super comfortable playing 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers on the field. If you get one of these guys like Jakobi or Calvin or Jauan, and you get one of these guys that are like legitimate starters, you feel a lot more comfortable on those 3rd and long situations, those 2nd and long situations, to go out there in 11 personnel. And, when you have to, spread things out and you play an opponent where, they don't like to be spread out, you can do that. But you can also have the option of playing heavy and, establishing the run and all that stuff that the Steelers have really built this offense around. So, I wouldn't pay too much for a wide receiver if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would try and stay in that kind of day 3 pick kind of lane to try and pick up a veteran. But at the end of the day, this offense is playing pretty darn well, and it's going to be interesting to see what caliber of guy they bring in, because I do think they will bring in one more receiver before the trade deadline to help out this offense. But I could certainly see them going to free agency and getting Marquez Valdes-Scantling just as easily as I could see them picking up Jakobi Meyers. So we're just going to have to see on that. Now, I'm going to finish up today's show here, guys, by talking about Lamar Jackson, who is officially out this week versus the Chicago Bears. It was originally believed that he was going to be able to play this week versus Chicago, but he is going to be out this week. And if their offense has been any indication over the last several weeks without Lamar, it looks like the Chicago Bears, the Chicago Bears are going to be able to pretty easily get their 5th straight win, and the Baltimore Ravens are going to, take yet another loss. And if that's the case, unless, Baltimore pulls off a really crazy upset, they're going to fall to 1-6 tomorrow. And if that happens, they have a very narrow path to make the NFL playoffs. They have to play almost perfectly down the stretch if they're going to, even make a potential chance to upset the Pittsburgh Steelers or maybe even Cincinnati for the division crown, let alone, just make the playoffs as a wild card, because usually you need 10 wins in the National Football League to make the playoffs. Maybe sometimes you can sneak in at 9-8, but chances of that are pretty slim. And if you're already at 6 losses and, you still got a lot of games left on your schedule, you're only at 1 win, you're already at 6 losses, you're going to have to win 9 of your next 10 games just to get to 10 wins on the year. And even then, that's not even guaranteeing the Steelers, are at 10-7 as well. They would have to sweep the Steelers. They would have to do a lot of different stuff. They would have to, they'd just have room for one more loss the rest of the season just to put themselves in contention to win the division. So, the chances, I think, of Baltimore winning the AFC North will decrease dramatically if they lose tomorrow, like I'm guessing they're probably expected to at this point. So obviously that's good news if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, especially if Baltimore loses tomorrow and then the Steelers turn around and beat the Green Bay Packers and the Steelers are sitting at 5-2. That is the type of situation here where we could be looking at, all right, man, this division is really is really there for the taking for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as long as they don't completely crap the bed and, Cincinnati or Baltimore comes up late, it really feels like, by this time tomorrow, or by this time Monday, I should say, it could feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers are really in the driver's seat to win the AFC North. Now, obviously, we can't count our chickens before they hatch. The Steelers need to go out and take care of business. Of course, we have to see if the Bears are going to take care of business versus Baltimore. Caleb Williams is certainly hasn't been great this year. He could make some big mistakes that keep Baltimore in the ball game tomorrow. But just on paper, what it looks like right now, it looks like Baltimore's going to go to 1-6. And if that's the case, that's obviously really good news. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and you're hoping to get a home playoff game at Acrisure Stadium this year, So we'll see what ends up happening tomorrow, man. So that'll be it for today's show. Thank you guys so much for joining me here. I know it's almost a 20-minute at-home video. Had a lot to talk about today with all the different trade rumors and all the different speculation going out right now. So I just want to thank you guys for making it to the end of today's show. I will see you guys next time. And until then, here we go, Steelers.